Hello and good morning, CSI257 students for the fall 2014 semester at Anne Arundel Community College. This morning's video tutorial is going to be on PacketTracer activity 7.2.2.4, and this is just configuring basic EIGRP. And so again, this is a nice activity to ease you into getting used to configuring EIGRP, as this is going to point out a number of the configuration steps that we need to run. So let's go ahead and step right in here. So configure EIGRP. We're going to be working with router 1 initially. So we'll bring up router 1. And this topology should look very familiar. We were just working with this with OSPF. So on router 1, we're going to go from user exec into privilege exec and then into global config mode. And we're going to issue the router EIGRP1 command. Now, a quick note here, you'll remember from the video tutorials on OSPF that the process ID that we used with OSPF was locally significant. And what that means is that you could have area 0 with 100 different routers in area 0, and every single one of those routers could be using a different OSPF process ID number. So they did not have to match. However, with EIGRP, that is not the case. You'll notice that it doesn't say process ID number, it says autonomous system number. And so we need to put the autonomous system number in here, and this AS number does need to match in order for routers to form an EIGRP adjacency. So we'll go ahead and use EIGRP1, and it says what are the range of numbers that can be used for autonomous system numbers. As you just saw, it's 1 to 65,535. And PacketTracer, there's a nice note here actually. It says PacketTracer currently does not support the configuration of an EIGRP router ID. And so if I were to come over here, and again, remember this is from GNS3, so this is actually the real deal Cisco iOS here. So if I were to go from privilege exec to global config, router EIGRP1, and do a question mark, you can see that we have a whole host of different choices. So if I say EIGRP and do a question mark, you can see that there is the router ID. And that's what they're talking about. So the EIGRP router ID, similar to when we set the router ID with OSPF. However, with EIGRP, unlike OSPF, there is no DR, BDR election that takes place here. So that is a concept that is mutually exclusive to OSPF and has nothing to do with EIGRP. So there are no DRs or BDRs elected here. But again, the router ID allows you to identify this router with something meaningful, with a meaningful value, where if you were to see the router ID in output, maybe debug output or show EIGRP output, that you would be able to easily identify that router and say, oh right, that's the router that's on the 5th floor, or this is the router that is down the street at another one of our facilities. So that's the command that they're referring to there. All right, so we'll come back over here. Okay, now it says advertise directly connected networks. So again, I'm on router 1 here. If I do show IP route, you can see that we've got some connected networks, and it also, because we're running the 15.x branch of code, and we are 15.1, so since we're running the 15.x branch of code, we've got those L's, right, which are our local entries. And if you ever look at those and you're not sure what they mean, you can always pop right up here, and it's going to give you a quick explanation of what that means. So L is your local and C is your connected, right? So there are our local and our connected entries. Okay, so it says on on each router, we're going to go ahead and configure EIGRP to advertise the specific directly connected subnets. And so for router 1, it shows us the configuration. So it's network, and then we're going to put in here 172.16.1.0, and we're using a wildcard mask here, just like OSPF. Now you'll notice when I do a question mark, see there is no area here either. So OSPF and EIGRP, while their purpose is the same, which is to route packets, their configuration syntax and the way that they're set up is very different, and so that's something to keep in mind while we're going through here. So we're going to advertise 16.1, 16.3, and then finally we're going to do 192.168.10.0, and this is going to be, it's a /30, so it would be a .3, right? Okay, so we're going to do this on each of the 3 routers. So we're going to pull router 2 up, and we'll go to, oops, got the wrong tab there. So we'll go to the CLI tab. So again, on router 2, we'll go from user exec into privilege exec, and then into global config, and we're going to go ahead and say router EIGRP1, and we're going to add our network statements in just like we did, and I'll do a do show IP route. So it shows us our connected, so 72.16.2.3, and then the 192.168. So they won't be exactly the same. 172.16.2.0 and 0.0.0.255, and then .3.0, and as you can see, we have an adjacency now that's come up, and then the 192.168.10.0. But again, you can see here it asks you, how can you tell the subnet mask? So the subnet mask is right there on the connected route, and so this is going to be actually, so .8. Let me scroll back up here. I did not catch that on the first one. Okay, so since this is .8, it's a /30, so we need to make sure that when we're subnetting, we've got the right network ID. So you can see there I have 192.168.10.0. So if I were to make that a /30, I would get .0 is the network ID, .1 is the first usable IP, .2 is the second, and .3 as the broadcast address. So then the next subnet would be .4 for the network ID, .5 and .6 would be our usables, .7 is my broadcast. Come down here, so to be .8 is my network ID, .9 and .10 will be my usable IPs, and .11 is going to be my broadcast. And so if we take a look here, it looks like .8 is the network ID, so I'm going to need to change my statement there, and I'm looking at router 1, which was .5, so that was the usable IP on the serial interface, so my network ID is going to be a .4, so we're going to go back and take a look at that real quick. Alright, so we're going to, let me click in here, so this is going to be a .10.8, and then we need to say if it's 10.8, that's going to be a .3, right, for a /30, because this is a wildcard mask. All right, so network 192.168.10.8.3, and so we'll put that one in there, and so then that takes care of router 2. Let's jump back to router 1, and that last network statement in there, you can see I put in 10.0, and the network should actually be 10.4, and that'll give us our first, or that'll give us the .5 would be the first usable. I'm just taking a look here, and I want to make sure, and it's still in there, so I'm going to go ahead and remove it. So we're going to say no network, because this would be looking for the networks that has usable IPs .1 and .2. And so we'll pull that one out. So if I do a do show run, there we go. That looks much better. Okay. All right, so we're going to go ahead and jump over to router 3 now, and we're going to do the same thing. And we're going to bring back our rules. I'm not sure where everything went there. All right, so we've got router 3. So we'll pull the CLI up, and we're going to say from user exec mode to privilege exec, and then in the global config. And we're going to do the same thing, router EIGRP1, keeping in mind that that 1 is the autonomous system number and it needs to match, or the adjacency will not be formed. And then we'll add our network statement in, so do show IP route. And so it's going to be network, and this guy here has the 192.168.1.0, and it's a /24. So that's our wildcard mask there. The next directly connected is going to be network 192.168.10.4, and that's a /30, so it's going to be 0.0.0.3. Again, remember, it's not a net mask that we're using here. It's not a net mask value, it's a wildcard mask. And then router 3 also has network 192.168.10.8, and that is also a /30. So 0.0.0.3, and you can see the adjacencies came up right away. Okay, so all connected networks have had EIGRP enabled, and now we're going to have to go back here because step 3 says configure passive interfaces. So configure the LAN interfaces that do not to not advertise EIGRP updates. So for router 1, the configuration is shown, and so my assumption is that's going to be gig 00 across the board here. So gig 00 there and gig 00 there, and we'll check before we do that. So we'll pull router 1 up, and again, if I do the question mark, you can see it'll have a passive interface command right there, and then we just need to say gigabit Ethernet 0/0. And the reason that we're doing this is because there's no need to send or receive updates on the gig 00 interface out to the LAN, because there are no EIGRP speakers or EIGRP talkers that exist out on that LAN segment. All right, so we'll passive interface gig 00, and it looks like the next step is to do no auto summary. And what that means is back in the 12.x code, you used to have to type this in all the time, and there is still some debate as to whether or not this is on or off by default, but this is always it's always a good idea to go ahead and type this command in anyway to hard code it so that it doesn't do auto summarization. And auto summary, you should be familiar with, would be an example where if we put in a network statement that was 10.37.50.0/24, with the older version of code, what would happen is EIGRP, if you did not have no auto summary on, would simply look at that network as 10.0.0.0. So it would automatically summarize it to the classful boundary. In fact, let me pull up, let's see what happens here. So we're on router 3 where we did set up and show run section EIGRP. And let's take a look here. So we do have EIGRP set up. So let's see what happens when I go in here, show IP interface brief. Let me make sure I've got the network. So that's a 209. So let's choose router 2. So show IP interface brief, which is where I think we have a 10.10.10.2. And I'm going to go ahead and go from privilege exec into global config, router EIGRP1. And I'm going to say network 10.10.10.0, 0.0.0.255, and I'll hit enter. And if I do show run section EIGRP, let's confirm that the no auto summary. So you see, auto summary in this version of code is on by default. So in 12.4.25d, auto summary appears to be on by default. And so if we did not want EIGRP to auto summarize that network, and in fact I should probably pull out, let me drop out the, or actually let's pull this back up here and do, so I pull the network out. So if I were to drop it in as 10.10.10.0, right, which is our /24, do show run section EIGRP, and that's what we were expecting. I apologize. I put the wildcard mask on there by mistake. So as you can see, right, with auto summary on, it took the network statement, and even though I entered in 10.10.10.0, what happened here? It auto summarized, right? It summarized this to the classful boundary, which for a class A address is a 255.0.0.0. So that's why we're seeing the 10.0.0.0. So if I typed in no auto summary, right, let's see if it's a little different here. It's not, so it's already been summarized. So let me pull it out and say no network 10.10.10.0. And now if I type in network 10.10.10.0 and hit enter, let's see what it does. Show run section EIGRP. You can see, even with auto summary off, here it is still summarizing it to a classful boundary, which is where the wildcard mask would come into play, right? So that is what auto summary means, is that it's going to go ahead and summarize it to a classful boundary. Okay, so we're back over here. So it wants us to put no auto summary on, which we did on router 1, so that should wrap up router 1. Let's go take a look at router 2, and we're going to come back in here, finish up our config on router 2. So we're going to say passive interface GI00, and then we're going to say no auto summary. All right, so we'll do an end and a write mem, and same thing over here on 1 just to be sure. So end, write mem, and then back over to router 3. We're going to say passive interface gig 00, and then we're going to say no auto summary. All right, so we'll do an in and we'll do a write mem. So if I do a show IP EIGRP neighbors, right, it'll show me who my neighbors are. It'll show me out which interfaces I'm learning those neighbors. It'll show you the order in which the neighbors were learned. So it learned about .5 first and then .9. So let's take a quick look over here. So we've got 66 out of 80. So let's go ahead and check our results and see what it's looking for. Route 1, Route 1. So on router 1 and router 2, we've got Route 1 is incorrect. And so we may have an incorrect net mask in there, maybe an incorrect route in there. So let's go back and take a look. So on router 1, it's saying that route 1, so show IP route. And you can see now that we've got the D here, and the D signifies routes being learned by or via EIGRP, the EIGRP routing protocol. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a peek at what is not correct with our route statement. So let's do a show run, and we're going to cruise down to the EIGRP statement. All right, so we've got 172.16.1.0, and that's a /24. Aha! So here's our mistake right here. So that should be, if we do a do or show IP route, that 172.16.3 is a /30. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into global config mode, router EIGRP1, and I'm going to say no network 172.16.3.0.0.255. And now I'm going to say network, network 172.16.3.0.0.0.3, and that is going to resolve the issue. Now, you may be wondering, why is it that even with incorrect networks, right? So the subnet mask is incorrect, though the wildcard mask, which indicates the subnet mask, was incorrect. And I changed it on one side and it came up, but on the other side it didn't. And this is a really great question that comes up a lot of times when studying EIGRP, and that is that with EIGRP, the subnet masks do not have to match. And so remember, on one side, the mistake was, or on both sides initially, the mistake was that both networks were /24s, right? And so that's going to give us 254 usable IPs, so from .1 up to .254, right? And those are our usable IPs. Now with OSPF, if your subnet mask doesn't match, OSPF is not going to form an adjacency. However, with EIGRP, if the subnet masks don't match, but they overlap, meaning the usable range of IP addresses that you could have overlap and would be in the same range if they had the same subnet mask, it is going to form an adjacency. So we had /24s on both sides, and it worked, which you would expect, and the subnet masks matched. I just changed over here, we just changed this guy to a /30, right? And a /30 using 172.16.3.0, if it's a /30, my usables are .1 and then .2, and that's it. However, .1 and .2 in this /30 are also in that /24. So again, they would say, sometimes you hear this referred to as this is sort of the super net, right, of this /30. So they overlap, which means these addresses with this subnet mask are also in this range of addresses with that subnet mask, the /24, and therefore EIGRP will form an adjacency. And so let me sneak over to router 2, which is the router on the opposite side, and you can see there that we had a graceful restart. So if I do a do show run here, sure enough, I've got the wrong net mask here. And so again, this is something to pay very close attention to, especially if you're taking an exam or you're trying to troubleshoot and you're wondering, well, wait a minute, I've got differing wildcard masks, which is going to result in differing subnet masks. However, EIGRP is still going to work, and this is why it's going to work, is that this subnet, the range of usable addresses for this /30 are also in this larger subnet that encompasses the /30. And so hopefully that makes sense, because again, coming off of a couple of or a chapter of OSPF and trying to learn all of the intricacies and nuances of OSPF, it's important to understand that with EIGRP it's very different. And this is one of the major differences, is that the subnet masks do not have to match for an adjacency to be formed. However, that said, in order for us to get the points and to collect all of our points up, we need to make sure EIGRP1, oops, sorry, I got to be in global config, router EIGRP1. So in order for us to get those points, we need to make sure that we have everything in here. So no network 172.16.3.0, 000, whoops, 255, and then we're going to say network 172.16.3.0, and we're going to make it a /30. And so at that point, we're back up now to 73 points. So you'll notice when I ran that command, there was no information about the network going up or down or a graceful restart. So let's take a peek here real quick. So I've got the 192.168.10.8, and that's a /30. We've got the 17.3 as a /30, and then look at this, another typo. 172.16.3, it's still in here. So looks like we could be missing a network, and we've got the same network twice. So again, let's go ahead and let's sort this out. So I'm going to say no network 172.16.3.0 0.0.0.255, and so we're going to fix that. And then I'm going to say network, and the network we're missing is the 172.16 2.0, which is a /24, even though we have that interface listed as a passive interface. All right, so now let's do a do show run here. Let's see what we've got. Looks much better. Okay, so we're going to check on connectivity here using some of our PCs. So we'll look at PC3, and I'm going to try to ping PC1, which is 172.16.10.10. And so it's coming back and telling me the destination host is unreachable. And so that is not good. All right, we may have some other troubleshooting that, oh, I'm sorry, 10.10, 1.10. There we go, better. So it's going to ARP out because it's not on the same network segment. And then we have success. There we go, as you would expect. PC1, let's ping PC3. So I'm going to ping 172.16. And this is going to be .2.10. We'll ping PC2. And again, it's going to ARP out to figure out, hey, who is my default gateway and I need to get off this segment. And then R2, we'll take a look at PC2 here, and we'll ping PC3. So ping 172.16. Actually, there's a 192 over there, I believe. Yep. So we'll do 192.168.1.10, and we've got success. All right. So we fully established everything. Remember that EIGRP, the subnet masks do not have to match if there's an overlap, right? However, best practice, don't set it up this way and be satisfied that it's simply working like this. Be sure that your subnet masks do match, but know that even if they don't, if one subnet includes the other subnet's range of usable IPs, like it does in this case, that EIGRP will form an adjacency. And then also remember the auto summary, right? It's always a good idea to put in no auto summary or to check just to make sure, because there is some debate as to whether or not it is on by default or not on by default. All right, well, this has been PacketTracer tutorial for PacketTracer activity 7.2.2.4, configuring basic EIGRP. And hopefully this cleared up any questions or confusion that you may have had. All right, best of luck in your studies and have a great day.